During the Civil War, what would you do if you disagreed with the side that your state was fighting for? The answer for the 1st Alabama Cavalry was to fight against Alabama and the Confederacy and for the Union. The new book, Silent Cavalry, tells that story. White volunteers from the Confederate States made up almost 5% of Lincoln's army. White support for the war peaked after the attack on Fort Sumter in 1861, but declined steadily after the Union victory at Shiloh in the spring of 1862. How then did the Civil War become the only conflict in which, as filmmaker Ken Burns told me, the losers got to write the history, erecting statues of Johnny Reb outside seemingly every courthouse in Alabama? And in the 20th century, after the history of the Civil War had been romanticized into mythology, the Confederate statues and monuments moved north. In 1914, the Confederate Memorial Statue was unveiled in what had been a cemetery for Union soldiers, Arlington National Cemetery. Here is Arlington National Cemetery's official description of that Confederate monument. 32 life-sized figures depict mythical gods alongside Southern soldiers and civilians. 2 of these figures are portrayed as African American, an enslaved woman depicted as a mammy holding the infant child of a white officer, and an enslaved man following his owner to war. The Pentagon is in the process of removing the Confederate memorial from Arlington National Cemetery. More than 40 Republican members of Congress are demanding that the Pentagon stop the removal. The Republican governor of Virginia wants the monument to be relocated to Battlefield State Historical Park in the Shenandoah Valley. Joining us now is the former executive editor of the New York Times, Howell Raines. He is the author of the new book, Silent Cavalry: How Union Soldiers from Alabama Helped Sherman Burn Atlanta and Then Got Written Out of History. Howell, thank you very much for joining us tonight. And I have to say, I learned more truth about the Civil War just in the title of your book than I learned in elementary school and high school.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. I'm a little stunned that Nikki Haley would provide a news peg for a book about the Civil War, but she embraced the big lie that is one of the core beliefs of the myth of the lost cause, which was that the war was about states' rights, not slavery. The other big lie in the myth of the lost cause is that most Southerners supported the war. In fact, after Shiloh, the support soon declined quite dramatically, and that persisted until the end of the war. Now, Professor Richard Nelson Currant, a Lincoln biographer, wrote a landmark book in 1992 that was little noticed at the time. He found that 100,000 residents of the Confederate states, those seceding states, volunteered to serve in the Union Army. Before these men had been ignored, they are missing from almost every mainstream history book about the Civil War. 3,000 of those 100,000 white Union soldiers from the South were from North Alabama, my family's ancestral counties in the Alabama hills. 22 hill counties of Alabama voted against secession, and when it happened, they refused to serve the Confederacy for 2 reasons. One, they lived on small mountain farms and could not afford to buy slaves. And 2, they believed in the principle laid down in 1840 by their near neighbor, Andrew Jackson, that the Union was too sacred to be split up over the issue of slavery. So these, in 1862, when Union troops occupied Huntsville, Alabama, hundreds and then thousands of Alabama farm boys sneaking through the forest, often at night, went to Huntsville and then to other recruiting posts held by the Yankees and joined voluntarily into the Union Army. That's a surprising part of the story, but it's not the most surprising part to me. These 2,066 members of the 1st Alabama Cavalry so distinguished themselves as fighters and spies that General William T. Sherman personally selected them as his escort and bodyguard on the march to the sea. And in short order, the 1st Alabama Cavalry became the point of Sherman's march. They were there at the burning of Atlanta, and then they led the march to Savannah, and did so with such distinction that General Francis Blair, the head of one of Sherman's 4 corps, picked them as the place of honor in the parade, the victory parade through Savannah in December 27th, 1864. It's taken me decades of research to put together a true picture of the 1st Alabama Cavalry. I should say that my great-great-grandfather, James Howell Abbott, my name Howell is based on his biblical name Howell, helped a Walker County farm boy slip across the Mississippi River in his canoe, and so he was a recruiter for the 1st Alabama Cavalry. I've found this out only after years of research, so it's taken me, because they're missing from most history books, it's taken me literally decades of research to piece together the military history of the 1st Alabama Cavalry. Then I found myself on the cusp of a historical detective story. Why had no one heard of these people? They're missing from all the mainstream history books, and they're missing for a very specific reason. And it took me, again, even more years to piece together this set of events.
How
In the years,
you make the point that many Southerners did not own slaves, and if they didn't own slaves, they did not have a stake in that war. That's something you're going to have to explain to Nikki Haley, because she does not seem to know that as of tonight in New Hampshire. Howell Rand